Lizzie? Okay, boom. All right, she says she's on the way. All right, so this will be a very cool one because it's a different angle than fundraising is traditionally. Um, hiring is one of the most important things, specifically starting with your co-founder and then moving up from there. And so Lizzie has been doing this about 10 years and has a lot of experience. So we talked on a call last week to prepare for this. And I thought she had a lot of good insights around, there she is. Hello, Lizzie.
Okay, not on mute. Hello, everyone. How are you?
Oh, sorry to not send that to you. That was my mistake.
Good.
Welcome to the collective. All right, so I was just giving you a quick intro. We'll do this one as a group chat because I think a lot of people have questions around where they find people to hire. How do you go through that process properly? And like a lot of things we talked about, the mistakes that I made and a lot of people have made are things that you can help people look out for. So Lizzie was nice enough to make a presentation for us today. And let me make you the host so that you get the ability to share your screen. But Lizzie, before we do that, on your website, one of the testimonials is from Nathan, the Oculus co-founder, which obviously to all of us is like one of the three people that basically set us down this path in life when they started Oculus, which is pretty cool to think about. Can you maybe share a little bit around the story of how you got connected there? And just like what are some of the lessons of working with someone at that level who obviously thinks about money and things of that sort in a different manner than most people because they've had such outstanding success.
Yeah, Nate's been awesome to work with. So I started my company July of 2020. Here's Waldo Recruiting. And I started working with Nate maybe in August. And they had just started and they were small. And I kept hearing about them. So I reached out to them. They said they didn't need help, but then I found them someone good. And they were just 5 people. And so at that stage, you can say it's Nate Mitchell's company, but not everyone necessarily recognizes the name. So when you're so small like that, it's really an educational piece about who the founders are and the messaging, what they're doing, and why you might want to work at a startup and de-risking the fact of working at a startup. But in 2020, it was hard to get people in general. Quiet quitting hadn't happened, but the market was super different. And so people didn't know who Mountaintop was or Nate was. So it was really an educational process. What was great about working with somebody who's done it before, Nate's hired so many people, he knows what to do. And so they had a very clear and structured process from the beginning, which was refined over time, but what we could share with candidates. And they do a fast process. If you're a startup, I'll get into this, you're not going to win at money. You're not going to win against Meta, right? But you can win at ownership, ability to contribute, the people that you're going to work with, and you can be a faster and better process than a big company ever could. So they're really good at that. And then what Nate did, which is a strategy that I think that most companies should use, at the end, he presents the offer and he talks to the person about the long-term vision of the company. And everybody comes away with stars in their eyes because he is so charming and personable. And you're like, yeah, I want to work with this person. And so that's a really excellent strategy, is to talk to the CEO/visionary at the end and understand their big term picture for the company and what it could be.
You say you can't compete with Meta on money, but like in some ways a startup can because the dream of the $1 billion exit is always kind of looming. How big of a selling point is that, or is that not important to emphasize to hiring?
I think you really just need to understand your candidate. Is this a single breadwinner person that has 5 children and lives in Menlo Park? If so,
Right.
the equity is not the most important thing. They need to pay their financial bills. And one of the biggest issues that I see founders make is they don't address equity. I just talked to a founder. They're like, oh yeah, we're talking to this executive from Punchy. We think they want to join our company. I'm like, hey, you want to pay $150,000? This executive at Punchy is making $600,000. Have you chatted with them about that disparity? They're like, oh, no. So, I mean, perhaps this person has made their money and wants equity and wants ownership and wants to work at a startup, but you need to understand what are the financial obligations this person has? And does this person live in an apartment with their cat somewhere and they have that flexibility, or they're later in their career and they've had all this success and they want to figure out what it is that they truly want to do. But until you understand that, if you don't understand that, you're going to be like, oh, my company could be worth, $1 billion later, and you're not going to tell them something they actually care about. So first figure out your candidate's motivation and then speak to their motivation.
Awesome. Well, if any of us, our businesses don't work out, we'll be calling you to go work for Nate. So keep that in mind, everybody. Because
Thanks. It's a hard one to,
yeah.
hard to get through there.
All right, Lizzie, I'm gonna give you the host. You want to share your screen and go through your presentation you made, and then I think what we'll do is we'll save questions for after, and then we'll have people raise their hands and ask specific questions around where do you find co-founders, I'm looking for this type of hire, cultural fit, things like that.
Sounds good. Okay. Here presentation. Let me share it with you. Slideshow. Okay. So here's a little bit about us. Here's the quote from Nate. So we specialize in game and game adjacent tech in North America and Europe. So we do anybody you need to hire at a game studio, creative, engineering, product, whatever it is. And then game adjacent tech, streaming, AI, VR, that kind of thing. Any of these roles, mid-level through executive, are differentiating factors that I've been doing games recruiting for 8 years. We really understand the market. And we especially, right now, we're focused on working with early stage companies that need help setting up their interview process and understanding the market. What does the data say? And how do I need to adjust my search, adjust my outreach, adjust my job description or interview process in order to land the candidate that I need? That's us. And first, everyone is like, hey, what's going on with the industry? This is always the question. So there have been record-breaking layoffs. All of the layoffs in 2023 broke records, and the layoffs in just January, I think, were more than 2023. So it has been a rocky few years. I'm sure that's a massive subject for you in this group. And so there are so many layoffs and there are people out of work, especially if you're a concept artist or a recruiter or something that is people find to be more easily replaceable. But the end says multiple offers. Candidates in niche roles, for instance, if you're an engine programmer from Respawn Entertainment who is laid off, you will have 8 offers. You have options. And so I think a mistake that a lot of people make is when quiet quitting was a thing in 2022 and 2021, and everyone was scrambling for employees. They were paying too much. They were offering sign-on bonuses and all these crazy things. And now I see that companies have the attitude, hey, there's so many layoffs. We can pick whoever we want. So it's okay not to get back to people. It's okay to have a sloppy interview process. It is not okay, and it is never okay to do that. And we are on this cusp. I just did a LinkedIn Live with Amir of change where hopefully rates will drop. The presidential election will be over. It's just a cycle, and we're going to swing back to the employees having the upper hand. It's just a matter of time. And so it's important to figure out how you can set yourself up to attract top talent right now while you have the opportunity, but also to retain them when it becomes an employee's market again, which it will. According to Amir, only 20% of jobs are remote. So like we talked about before, you're a startup, you are not paying cash of a larger company short term, and you're not going to have the brand household name, which is important to some people, but probably not the people for your startup. But you can win in being a remote first studio. This is a huge draw for people, and only 20% of companies are doing it. Most tech hubs are still Washington, Austin, California, obviously, and that's where a lot of the jobs are. But you can hire people in other states and other countries, and we're going to get into what you need to think about before you do that. Compensation trends. Okay. Since we're not competing with FANG so much anymore, which is Facebook, Amazon, Netflix, Google, or NVIDIA maybe is on there too, whatever acronym, the big companies so much because they're not hiring at the degree they are. And it has been proven by many companies that are currently folding, doing layoffs, paying high salaries as a startup is not a successful strategy because your burn rate is going to be out of control. So I would say that compensation has gone down, but you really need to understand still what is normal for the role that which you're hiring. And you need to think about what is required for the role that you're hiring. So in certain states and countries, it is mandatory that you post a salary range. And a lot of candidates have been trained to look for a salary range, and they will ask and they will be angry if there is not one. And so I think a best practice is, whether you're required to or not, to predefine a salary range, how to figure out what that salary range should be. If you're more established, you can use Kroner, which is a company that you pay for salary data from. However, since salaries need to be open, you can just troll job boards and try and figure out what other companies are paying and kind of figure out where you should be in that range, and also obviously where you should be in your budget range. If you are a startup that offers equity, you should also figure out what equity you are giving to somebody, but you also have to understand, does that person even care about equity, or do they need more cash in their life right now? Levels FYI is a website that shows all public company compensation. So I think this is from this is from Amazon, and you can see there's a base stock and then there's also bonus that's cut off. But when you're talking to somebody, a mistake many founders make is they get excited because the principal software engineer at Amazon might want to work at their company. But as you can see here, their total is going to be 476 about. I pulled this a while ago, but you can look at their base. So I think a good rule of thumb is to be a bit underneath a public company's base, maybe a lot, depending on your funding situation. And if you're talking to somebody from a big company, you really just need to understand their vesting schedule, their bonus schedule, and their financial needs. But you need to have that conversation at the beginning. You can also look at the website called Team Blind, where people anonymously post compensation information and information about the interview process in general. Um, Yes, Amazon comp is wild. Big company comp is wild. The average NVIDIA salary package total is $20 million right now. So there are some companies that, like Roblox, NVIDIA, don't even bother. You're a startup. It probably doesn't make sense for that person. Okay, this is the key of everything. Before you start hiring, you need to have all of these things and more already predefined, or you're going to spin your wheels and waste everybody's time. So, company pitch. What are you going to say to the candidate? What's your pitch? Why does somebody want to work for you? It's easy as the founder, but does your team know that? Are they on the same page as you? 99% chance no. So make sure everybody knows that. And I would even write it out, because if you're going to work with an internal or external recruiter, or if you're going to message people on LinkedIn or do some sort of reach outs, it's good to have that. The job description. You are not Riot Games. Do not copy a job description from Riot Games and be like, this is my job description. You can aggregate job descriptions. ChatGPT can start a job description for you, but you need to know what you're looking for. Otherwise, if you don't know, or if it's wishy-washy, you're going to interview people and waste time. So spend a lot of time creating a job description, review the job description with your team so everybody is aware of what it is that you're looking for and how you're going to decide on that person. How are you weighing them? And so almost everybody on your team kind of needs to go through interview training. And what you should do is find example profiles, LinkedIn profiles of who you think the right person is. I had a startup tell me that they wanted to hire Nick Whiting, for instance, from Epic, to make a minimal salary. And through that, you can also get feedback on, is my ask reasonable? Because sometimes you don't know what the market's going to say. So you can get feedback on, are the profiles that you think you want to hire for this job even possible, which is really important. Visa requirements. So if you're going to hire somebody in the US in a different country, it's possible, depending on the role, especially in engineering, that you are going to encounter somebody who's on a visa. It is essential that you have an immigration lawyer ready to go. You don't have to have them on retainer or anything, but you at least have somebody that you can contact. So if somebody is on a visa, you understand the cost. It's great to understand the cost. Maybe It's going to be a few thousand to $5,000 transfers, the liabilities of that person, and just what that means. So check into that and clearly define, like, yes, this is something I'm going to do, or no, this is something I'm not going to do. Figure out your location requirements. So we'll get into this more. Different states have different employment requirements and tax requirements, and different states and countries have different tax credits. So it's good to be strategic. And the more people you have in different locations, the more of a logistical headache it's going to be. You might find Sally in Georgia who you love, and Georgia's no state to hire in, but you do want to understand the ins and outs of that state or that country before you go forward and hire. And you might want to group people a little bit more strategically. um, we talked about comp ranges, but people are upset if you have a really broad comp range. And so I think it's good to do a comp range based on major metropolitans. Like maybe you're going to hire this person in Canada or the US, or maybe you're going to hire this person in Mexico. The range is going to be really different. So you could have a few different job descriptions for the areas. If you do want to hire in Montreal, you need to have your job description in French. So that's special. Montreal is special, although Montreal offers massive tax credits if you open an entity in Montreal. I think 26%, potentially more, but they're changing right now. And then you also need to think about, if you're going to be remote, what are you going to do if somebody lives, let's say, in Alabama, but moves to San Francisco? Are you going to increase their compensation? And if someone in San Francisco moves to Alabama, are you going to decrease their compensation? What's your general comp philosophy? Figure that out. And I think for a startup, it's really normal to have a base in equity. A bonus is not normal. You can say you might have it later, but it's better to just not overpromise and get into that. And you, as the founder and visionary, always are like, yeah, it's going to be good. We're going to be $1 billion in whatever years. But it's important to set the right expectations so people aren't disappointed. Offer strategy. This is very important. Highly, highly recommend making 2 offers, one higher base and lower equity, and one vice versa. People love to choose. Your kid loves to choose. Do you want to clean your room, or do you want to, I don't know, help your brother outside? Like, I want to help my brother outside. So, and it's, again, first you need to understand, is this person in a position in their life where they can afford to work for me? And equity, does equity really pull at them? Hopefully, yes. But there are those people that just have higher life expenses who unfortunately can't value equity as much. And then when you make the offer, I had a candidate decline an offer because the base was roughly the same, and 2 startups offered him 1%. And he was coming from 343, so he didn't know what 1% meant. He declined the offer. Then we had a intense conversation. We reviewed how many times have the founders exited? Is this probable? Who are their investors? What is the likelihood that their investors are going to have an exit? How many exits do their investors have? And what is the actual value of the equity? Because 1% could be drastically different. Most people have no idea how equity works. So you need to walk them through worst case, normal case, and best case scenario. And that is where the light bulbs really start going off, and you can win somebody on the dream, but just know that people don't know what you know. Okay, when you're doing the interview process, like we said, identify multiple example profiles and make sure your team understands why this is the example profile, and even leave notes like, love that this person worked at Zynga, early days on Farmville. This is exactly what we're looking for, or whatever. Figure out who's going to schedule the interviews. If you don't know this, you will fumble, you will drop the ball on a candidate, and you will lose them, and you don't have time to waste or mess up. Time kills all deals. So here I'm going to interview. I have my example profile. My job description is real and not from Riot Games. Here is the interview process. The first step is this. The second step is this person, this person. And here is who is responsible for letting the candidate know that they passed the interview and scheduling. If your team can actually manage their calendars. Calendly is a fantastic tool that you can just send the candidate the calendar if you don't have internal resources, and the candidate can schedule themselves. Also, if you have multiple interviews, you need to share before you begin. My friend Jennifer has a severely autistic son, and she makes drawings for him to explain what's going to happen next. And she tells him, hey, I'm going to pick you up from school tomorrow, and then we're going to go to the grocery store. She tells me this is what she does with everyone in her life because a basic human desire is to know what's going to happen next. So please share with your candidates at the beginning. Here is what the interview process will consist of. It's usually 3 steps. If we have questions, let them know there could be a third or a fourth or whatever it is, but share what it is so people can know what to expect. I have a company I hire for that does 6 one-hour interviews. Candidates were losing their mind because they changed to this process. They're like, I've had 4 interviews already. This is insanity. But if you tell them at the beginning, the whole interview process is only going to take 6 hours, they're like, wow, that's great. So it's just about phrasing the expectation. If you have a test, please do not wait until the candidate hits the test stage to make the test. This is going to waste everybody's time. Have the test already made. Understand you might need to pay a candidate for a test depending on where that candidate lives. Washington, California, more liberal states, you need to. Other countries, it's possible. The other thing about the test is ChatGPT is around. And so it's a big issue. People are using AI to complete a test if they can. And so I would really recommend some things are good to test for. Make the test reasonable. I mean, if it's a 40-hour art test, don't do that. Unless you plan to pay them and bring them on a contract, that would be appropriate. But just figure out like, what would I do? I just had a person try and hire a leadership role, and they were asking for a test. And the lead who was getting replaced was like, you know what? I realized, Lizzie, I wouldn't even have taken this test when we reviewed the data and realized that half of the people that were sent the test never even completed the test. So tests can be good. It's good to know the candidate is interviewed or is interested in you truly enough to do a test, but you can also lose a lot of people. So I think an interactive, like, here's how we work together, let's solve a problem together. Test is really going to be a lot better. If your team is not aligned, once I had team feedback that was, I don't like his shirt. If your team is not interview trained, while this is illegal feedback, this might be their feedback because they don't know how to properly interview. And so your team needs to be, you need to have your weight. Like, we weigh existing skills, potential, we weigh people on our values, we weigh people on whatever. If your team doesn't understand this, you're not going to make the hire, or you're going to make the wrong hire. And that's really expensive and a big waste of time. So ensure that your team knows what they're doing and they're aligned on the objectives, and you have defined in writing how you're going to evaluate people. Because if you haven't, you're not going to properly evaluate them. And then you need to confirm who's going to talk about to the candidate about next steps. Um, you, yes, if you need to figure out, what if the candidate doesn't make it? Who's going to tell them they're done? Who's going to tell them that they didn't get the job? And what can you do? What are you going to say? Because you can get sued for being potentially too honest, or if candidates feel like you're discriminating against them. So have that outlined. If you're going to hire outside of the US, or if you are outside of the US, an employer of record is a great choice. You can do a 1099 independent contract. Most venture-backed companies are using an employer of record to make sure. Remote.com, for instance, is going to charge you $600 a month, and they are going to take care of all the liability aspects, taxes in that country, everything you need to do. So that's a good option. And then once you get a mass of people in a certain area, you can figure out if there's a point where it actually makes sense to open the business and potentially get the tax credits. It's just the cost versus headache there. Diversity hiring. If you hire women or people of color on your leadership team, your company will outperform a company that does not have this. This is not an afterthought. You are not 15 white guys and you're like, hey, we think we want to have a woman on our team. That is not appealing. So you need to be proactive, think about this early, and be realistic. For a graphics programmer, there's 23 women in North America that do this job. So you're probably not going to find someone to do that in that role. But think about who you can hire and what places you can hire them for. If you open a job on LinkedIn and you just need some like button seat right away, that's okay. But it's important to be a little bit more strategic and figure out where you might be able to hire from. And if you do truly want to hire in, like in your heart, if it's okay if you don't, I hope that you do, you'll be more profitable. But if this is something that you care about, what networks of women or underrepresented people can you contact? And you need to contact them before you even open the job. Otherwise, you're going to find Brad and Chad and they're going to be qualified and you're going to hire them. That's a very easy route. So it takes more effort, but it's worth it. And your product slash game slash whatever you're making will be better. Um, where to hire referrals. You can post a job on LinkedIn. You are going to be inundated in applicants and it's going to be a diamond in the rough. So you can assign someone on your team to do that. It's going to be a big time suck. Might be worth it depending on the position. You can also try and hire a recruitment firm, mine, whoever else, to do this on an hourly basis for you. But it's going to be a lot of work. So just get ready for that when you open a job, especially if it's creative, like you might have 1,000 applicants in a day. So you better have a system. Your website is a good place. Posting on LinkedIn is great and just asking your network for referrals. You can post a job on ArtStation, work with indies. There's a lot of different job boards, but job boards are, you're going to spend so much time sifting. You can also work with a recruiting agency or hire your internal recruiter if you think that's wise, or hire a fractional recruiter. Recruiting agencies are not a commodity. If you find someone very cheap who ghosts your candidates, sends out poor messaging about your and poor messaging about who you are and reaches out to people on your team or people you just rejected, it's a really bad look. And so here's how I think you should figure out who to go with. Figure out what is their industry focus. If they are already in your industry and already have a network, they have a huge leg up and they have a bigger network than you do. Ask for recommendations. Like any service provider, I would never Google, like, I need a new CPA. Who should I use? Like, I want to get a referral from somebody that I know that has had a good experience with this person. Figure out who might they know that's not in your network. Check their LinkedIn connections. If they have 100, it's not good. Ask them what their candidate communication is. There's recruiters that will open up a job on ZipRecruiter and blast you candidates, and that might be cheap. And there's recruiters who will go out and partner with you and figure out who it is that you need from you and then find you that person, which saves you time. So understand what it is that you're signing up for. And there is definitely a massive cost to hiring a recruiter. They're going to charge you a retainer, usually a third up front, some amount up front. Some will do it contingent, or you can do an hourly setup. It really depends on who you're hiring and how hard the role is. But you need to think about what is your genius zone versus how much money you have, and should you be the one to be on LinkedIn cold outreaching to people. A good recruiter, it's like if you're buying a house, you can look at the open house, but a good recruiter is going to write messages to all the houses in the neighborhood, and then you just have more options. Okay, that's all. If you want to ask me any questions, your candidate is squirrely, a recruiting agency is doing weird things, you don't know if you need a recruiter, you need help making a relocation package, literally any recruiting question, you can reach out to me. My LinkedIn is insane, so if you could send me an email, that would be great. You could try LinkedIn, happy to connect. It's just Lizzie at Here's Waldo Recruiting. And if you want to book a time, I'm happy to answer any questions for you at any time. This is the QR code.
Awesome. Thank you, Lizzie. Yeah, to give context here, my last business, I have a presentation about this as well once you hop off, but I hired our first probably 15, 20 people with a recruiting agency, including my co-founder. And it saved me so much time. And it was one of the best things for me personally, because I was basically able to tell somebody, this is the profile of co-founder I'm looking for, and this is what VCs are interested in. And so then they were able to go find that type of person for me. So it comes with downsides, which I'll talk about at the end, but I do think it's very valuable for even at the earliest stage to be working with someone that understands what they're doing here. All right, so let's open up the floor for questions. I think a lot of people, we're an earlier stage to mid stage group. And so people are looking for less of a formal process as far as like, almost everyone here is ultimately doing the hiring themselves more or less. So can you maybe talk about like what are the tips that founder led hiring should be doing? And then if anyone has questions around specifically their business, where to find an X type of role, because I've seen a lot of questions in the group, please raise your hand, and then Lizzie will be able to share some of the insights around what you should be doing and where you should be looking for those types of roles. But Lizzie, can you maybe kick it off with like founder-led 5-person business? You need a 6-person. How do you go about picking the right person for the role when it's such a different beast than how Meta and all these larger companies go through that process?
I would really figure out what are your core values. I wish I did this sooner for my own business. And does this person exhibit your core values? Because it depends on the role. For me, there's a lot of gray zone in recruiting. So I need to know, you're going to make the right decision and have the right values in the gray zone. But I think that's very important. As the founder, you are busy, you're a visionary, you are juggling so many different things. And so you need to relinquish control, which is probably the hardest thing to do, and let your team be involved, and ideally have it not just be you. And when your team gives feedback, listen to your team and make sure your team knows what you're looking for, because they don't know what's inside your head. Someone told me you're a chief repeating officer when you're a CEO, which is kind of true. So just make sure your team's on the same page as you. And you probably want to be the first one to screen the candidate every time, but there's going to be a point where that's not appropriate anymore because you're focusing on founder stuff, and your hires are really important, but you need to be able to trust your team to make the right decision too, or you don't have the right people on your team anyway. James?
Chief repeating officer is low key some of the best advice you can get, because you're right. You just gotta continue saying the same message as the CEO so everyone's aligned.
7 times, people hear it after the 7th time. Yeah.
Yeah. James, hello, welcome. You want to unmute yourself, ask Lizzie your question?
Hi, yeah, can y'all hear me okay?
Yeah.
So my question is, I had a situation where we hired someone who I thought was a really good like culture fit. I really felt like they exhibited a lot of the qualities that I have personally have. So I saw a lot of like myself or like a younger version of me in them. And they lived in like the LA area, so they weren't cheap. But about like a couple months in, we actually ended up in a pretty rough spot, having to terminate like half of our team, honestly. And I think to the work that they delivered and the costs that went into like, paying them and what we got out of it, and ended up having to like redo a lot of that work at the end. And just thinking like that many months, if I had like cut it off earlier and fired them, I could have saved myself like a month of runway for the rest of the team. It would have been huge. How do you decide when you have to make that decision whether to give someone the benefit of the doubt and like see if they work out and give them time to like deliver, or know that they're not going to be the one?
For me personally, I have weekly KPIs for my team, and they set their own KPIs, and then every week they say that they're done or not done. And if we have this, we run on EOS, so we have all the core values, we rank people on them, and do they get it? Do they want it? Do they have capacity? So we just evaluate people on that very clearly. That's a you question, and I think no one has ever fired anyone too soon. That's so advice somebody gave me.
Yeah, that's great advice.
It's really hard. But like you touched on LA and LA being expensive, and I think yeah, it's easy to open your role and be like, oh, well, someone from LA applied. Oh, they're really good. But like if you hire that person in Montreal, it might cost you half. So it's also really good to think about what locations you might want to hire from the beginning, because you don't have much runway and you're an early stage startup.
Yeah, that's great advice. Thank you.
Can you talk through that, Lizzie? How do they set KPIs, and then how do you have that conversation if you're not hitting it? Hey, you need to get out of here. We have to let you go, unfortunately.
I hired people contract to hire the first, I mean, that's good if they'll accept it. Like if they're out of work, you could do a contract to hire to try it and just share what your expectations are for the role and check in every X amount of time and figure out if they're going to meet your expectations or not. But if not, it's okay. And like, hey, you're not meeting the expectations. Here's what we need from you in the next week, 2 weeks, you know, to here. And if it's not the right fit, that's okay. Yeah, there's a lot of different systems. I have a strike system now, and apparently no one ever makes it to the third strike. And that's a longer play. And if you don't have the money, then you have to let people go quickly.
No, I
And
think that's actually, oh, sorry, I was just gonna say that's definitely what we needed, because I think there was many situations where we were like, they're not delivering when we're checking on them. And then there's always like an excuse, or like they need more time and they're reworking this, or they're working hard at it, but they're not.
Yes,
Yeah,
it's so hard. And also, you made the decision to hire the person. So it's kind of a blow to your own ego to
yeah,
admit that you hired the wrong person and you made that mistake. But I feel like
so true.
you know in your gut, and it's just firing people is the worst. It's horrible. So, and it's a liability too. Uh, So I have
Thank
been,
you.
you're
I
welcome.
appreciate it.
I have a question if we don't have another one. Can you talk about how do you think about transparency? Like one of the stories I have in this presentation for afterwards was basically I wasn't transparent with how much money we had in our bank account, which as a startup, that's a problem for everyone. And employees are basing their decisions around like where I'm going to live, how committed am I am to this based on the health of the business. How do you think about transparency when hiring and also once you're bringing somebody into the company?
I think if you have, okay, I think most people who don't have a business don't get how business works. So I remember talking to someone and be like, this startup has 18 months of runway. They're like, that's scary. I'm like, no, you don't understand what runway most startups have.
That's huge.
So I think it's really important to know people don't get how a business runs, and you can share your financials, but it's meaningless. If you have a good amount of runway, it's really great to share that. That's just a personal philosophical decision how open and honest you are. But I think it would be the wrong thing to do to demand people work on site when you have very limited runway and they're going to move themselves or their family really far away. And you as the founder have to be optimistic, and you always think it's going to work. Like I have so many conversations. They're like, we're about to close funding, Lizzie. We're going to need to hire you. I want to talk to you right now. I'm always like, okay, let's talk after you get your funding, because will you get your funding or not? Like you think you will for sure, but reality is you very well may not. So I think it's important to be honest with your team, and the more honest and vulnerable you are, the more they trust you. And I had a friend, she actually had to end up closing the company that she became CEO of. It was really tough, but she was super honest with her runway, and I think it's great to be honest more ahead of time so people aren't surprised, but people were even willing to take salary cuts to stay there and really wanted to know how they could help and what they could do.
Yeah, I have let's see, I'll share this real quick. This was an email from someone in my last business. I guess it'd be cool to get your advice, I guess, in real time. But like, so this was one of our first hires. And if you read this bottom here, it says, it's also sometimes not clear exactly why a fundraise is happening. When you talk about raising a Series A, I can understand that raises is a strategic one and not a lifeline. But if we're doing smaller raises, does that mean we have a little runway left, or because we need more money to expand? Basically, he's unsure. And then he says, I imagine others in the company make long-term personal decisions, for example, whether to move from London, on how safe we feel in our current roles, income. That is obviously hinged on how we perceive the company is doing. That's a long way of saying, in my opinion, that we should be as transparent as we can be with ourselves about the prospects of the company, the amount of runway we have, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, so that they can prioritize things in their lives. He says, I guess the TLDR of his email is, if we don't only have a certain amount of funds left, I'd like to know sooner rather than later. That email, that it says October 2nd, 2020, 5:30 a.m. So I woke up to that email. That email still haunts me like to this day, because I ended up having to fire him, maybe 6 months later. And so I guess like how would you respond to managing a team? You run a business, you have a group of people, and you are good with hiring and managing people. So like how would you have handled that scenario?
At my company, we share a P&L every quarter. I don't get
Really?
into I don't get into the specifics, but we share a profit and loss all the time. And I mean, recruiting is like it's like a sales organization in a way. It's like, hey, here's our revenue, here's our goal. So it's a little bit more clear. And I'm not explicitly like, hey, this is how much runway we have. I mean, every company is like in an almost death moment at some point in time. And I think you get to have the angst as the founder. That's why you're the founder. But it's great to let people know. And I mean, if you're a startup, how can you be responsible? Like maybe you can hire a lot of people as contractors. And maybe you can say, like, if the game does really well, this is what we're going to do. And I guess on the flip side, you'd be scared of people quitting due to perceived instability. And that might be scary, but you're also in charge of people's lives. So the right person is going to have the appetite for your startup and understand that it's risky. And ideally, you find a startup person. So like you're probably not going to find someone from Amazon. They're not a startup person. They work at Amazon, It's really different. Just understand their needs and how you can appeal to them. And maybe they're up for working part-time for you, or maybe there's some solution. But I think it's good to be honest. But you also don't want to be too honest so people have tons of anxiety when they don't understand what they can control. So maybe like, here's our objectives. For me, like here's our company objectives. Here's what we need to do. Here's your objectives. Here's how your objectives tie into your company objectives. And it makes it easy for me, or for if someone is not performing, like, here's our company objective. We are not meeting because here is your objective. Here is what is missing. So we need to meet this objective. What do you need to do in order to meet this objective? Let's make a plan. Let's check in on our plan.
That was where I came to as well after all this time, was like when I look back and think about what should I have done better, I wish I would have been like almost 100% transparent and say like these are the numbers we need to hit. This is how much time we have. And that way everyone, because you're all in that together at such a small team size. That's one of the biggest lessons that I would do with my next business. Like to your point, like here's the P&L, here's our revenue, here's everything about the business that you want to know. What would how are we going to grow this number, and really focus it on growing those numbers, as opposed to me feeling like I had to protect everybody from knowing the like truth of it, and put it all on my back, which was horrible obviously to deal with.
Francisco talks about hiring people in different parts of the world for cheaper. It's very true. I think that's a great option. I think for most companies, your core team is generally in North America or Europe or wherever it is that you're located, especially if you want to get investment, like you have this shiny X whatever nonsense person that is going to help you raise money, right? But then outside, it's really important. Can you hire people in Poland? Can you hire people in Turkey? Where is it that you can hire people from? And what is their culture like there? What is the way that they communicate? What are the nuances? Do you need to pay them in a different way? Do they expect, are they in France and they take a month off in August? Like you should probably look into that. And if you need to fire them, it's very hard to fire people in Germany and France. So think about those things and be really strategic about what location you choose to hire people from, and understanding that. Severance deals when hiring are later. I feel like that's more of an HR question. I want more on the recruiting side, less than the severance. So that's up to you and your runway. I'm more about finding people for you, opposed to like once they go on board, that's the people ops internally.
It's a tough one, Joanna. I think there's well, I don't know the details, but I don't believe there's any legal obligation to give severance. So it really is just totally up to you if that's correct.
Depends on the one way though. I mean, if they know the state of your business, what you just don't want is someone to be upset with you, right? In the hiring process or when they leave. So if they understand that your company is not doing well, maybe you're not taking a paycheck, whatever it is, like it's less offensive that you're letting them go. But yeah.
Well, I think I mean, often severance is given to avoid lawsuits or potential future lawsuit, right? So,
yes.
because it's often given in exchange for signing a piece of paper that you won't sue at any point. So it's one of the reasons. I mean, the humanitarian reason is that this person is going to be out of work probably, and you're helping them bridge to the next till they find their next role. That's like the sort of more human reason. I think then I think the legal reason or the liability reason is then people sign
Yes.
agreements in return for the money that you give them as their severance.
But those agreements are being redone right now in certain
Yeah.
states to maybe not be able to be allowed to do that. So I think
Yeah.
having a lawyer and understanding what you can and can't do in terms of severance per the state the person is in is very important. And that's
Yeah.
also why hiring in so many states creates a lot more headache. Just something to think about.
Yeah. I was curious if you'd seen some, and I think in lots of corporate America, there's some stuff that's pretty standard on that. I was curious if what your point of view is in a more of a startup environment.
I think leave people to the best of the ability that you can. Like, how can you set them up with resources and give them X amount of runway, but they're still, how can you make them not super angry at you and make sure that they won't sue you from a business perspective is probably the number one thing. It is just like firing, right? You just don't want people to be surprised. If they're surprised, they're upset. If they're not surprised, there's more understanding. But people do wacky things all the time, so have a good employment lawyer.
Cool. Thank you.
Good question, Jenna. Hey, Jeff, you want to come up, unmute yourself?
Awesome. Hey, can you guys hear me? Great. Hey, Lizzie, thanks for the talk. Actually, it's funny, you mentioned Montreal a couple times, and I actually relocated there from Washington, partly for, some of the cost efficiencies and things that you were mentioning. But my question actually is more about when is the right time to hire? And I've kind of been getting by, I'm super early stage right now, and I've kind of been getting by filling out some of my needs with contracting. And so how do you think about like striking the right balance between bringing someone on full time and contracting, and like when's the right time to do that?
That is about your risk tolerance and budget, which I don't have insight to. And if you're going to raise who you might need and when you might need that person specifically. And I think I also understanding the profile of the person who is okay with a contract and who would be okay to be full time. So I think it's good to think about your org chart really strategically. What's your org chart right now, and what's your future org chart, and what milestones do you need to hit in order to unlock that role? And then when you need to unlock that role, what are the actions that you're going to need to do? Like, who needs to be involved? How much money do you need? What's that job description? And that's in flux a lot at a startup. But it's good to and know who's going to report to who. I mean, like, you're flying by the seat most of the time, and I know my process is really structured, and you're obviously going to start with less structure and slowly get more, but it's good to think about that stuff at the beginning. And congrats on Montreal. It's the best, for hiring. Some roughness with the French aspect, but
Yeah, definitely. It's a learning process for sure.
Yeah. I think also, I mean, who can you have overseas? How can you save money overseas? And what more cost-effective locations can you hire people for to decrease your monthly burn?
Cool, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Jeff. I have another question. If no one else wants to raise their hand, feel free though. Okay, so I see we have Patrick here. Lizzie, you told me you tried working with Patrick before on the hiring side, and you two have remained friends over the years. When I was hiring for our CMO at my last business, there was multiple people that I interviewed that I really liked. They got to know the business. I got to know them. Ultimately, I didn't hire them. And I think I was probably not as professional about how I was in hiring people. Like, I wouldn't always get back to them on time. There was a lot of things I made mistakes around. And I've seen some of those people that have gone on to do great things. And like, now I sit here thinking to myself, like, oh, I wish I still had that friendship or that connection with that person. So my question is, like, you never know who's going to be successful. You never know what someone can turn into. How do you, even if you don't hire somebody, how do you actually manage that relationship? Even, a year down the line, because they know your business, they always could somehow still help you at some point. What should founders be doing in that scenario?
I think what you should not be doing is not get back to them, because people make up stories. So just get back to people and be real with them. Probably ask ChatGPT to help write you a email that is professional and kind and leaves it open-ended, I just do that. And if there is a real opportunity to work together in the future, and maybe your business, maybe you can't afford them, maybe they found another great opportunity that made more sense for their life, or your startup is just not at the stage where you need that person, but you think you might be in X time, I would put it on my calendar to follow up with them every 3 months, every 6 months, engage with them on LinkedIn from a recruiting standpoint, and then just reach out when the time comes. But I think you have a really big opportunity to make a good name for yourself throughout the hiring process because it's small. And if someone gets rejected from your company, that can be okay. Like if you do it right, maybe they'll refer their friend to you. So I think treat everyone really well because you never know, maybe that person's gonna be an investor later. Like you're probably gonna work with them at some point somewhere. So
Yeah.
I wanna just jump in on that one too, just from a personal standpoint, just Joanna. I've had all of those experiences. Like I've had the experience where I didn't get hired, but I ended up becoming really close friends with the people. Like maybe not the next day, but a couple months down the road, years down the road, or I didn't hire someone, but we still had a good relationship, or I got the offer and didn't take it and still had a good, still managed to have a good relationship. So I think that's like there's a part about it, like not taking it personally. If you don't get a job, or it's there's it's usually not a personal thing. It's like that there's something, there's somebody else who's better suited for them in that exact moment, and understanding that sort of a little bit from both sides of the street, and that it is still a very small industry. And even our adjacent industries are still small industries. So I've worked in quite a few, our industry plus quite a few adjacent industries, and there's still people that come in that float in and out of these various industries. And so just being a kind person, being a transparent, straightforward and kind, and making, and like delivering the communication quickly,
yes.
but also doing it in a really sweet, kind way. And then making sure that there are ways to keep in touch, like whether it's you go for a coffee, or you have a virtual Zoom sometime, and not with false expectations or false hopes, but, or, refer them to be on a panel with you, or just like find other ways that, or, your friend is, your other friend in this cohort here is hiring now, refer them to that job and let them know, make sure that, that Don sent me, or whatever. There's just so many ways to, I don't know, be a good person, essentially, that, but I literally, if like, so many people I know in my life are people that I've met through a recruiting process on either side of that process. Like, but both that I was hiring for as well as that I was going for. And the fact that we never worked together, that has no negative impact on our relationship.
They can also be a huge referral partner for you later.
Yeah.
Like, just never know where a relationship is going to go.
And yeah, I'll let Tejas speak here, but it's tough to go through a mass amount of people and do everything correctly, which I think is why it's good to work with agencies. Tejas, go for it.
I mean, think about the person. Like if it was you and you were interviewing for a job and you had to go into the weekend of not knowing, only to be rejected on Monday, like you could save the person that angst and do it on a Friday. So just think about do it as soon as possible, even if it's hard. And it's really hard and unpleasant, but it gets easier the more you do it.
Yeah. And you got to be organized in the right manner.
Yeah, so many founders aren't. The other thing, you probably don't have an applicant tracking system. You need to have something. You cannot have nothing. You need to have a list. You can use Trello. You can get a basic ATS. You need to have something somewhere of the candidates that you've talked to and why or why not that you can reference later. That's really important. Otherwise, you're going to be disorganized and drop the ball, which can create really negative situations, even when you don't mean to, because you're busy.
Awesome. Tejas, hello.
Hey, also oh my God, that's a great reminder, because I sometimes drop the ball in terms of getting back to people. So thanks. That's a good reminder. Thank you. No, yeah, don't do that. Yes. So at my last company, I was working for a startup. I wasn't a founder, I was just an individual contributor, but we received an infusion of cash, it was like 5 million. And we ended up over hiring, but in my opinion, we ended up over hiring in the wrong departments. Like we hired 3 salespeople, and we had 2 developers. And we ended up going out of business. That's like the short story. But I was wondering, from your perspective, when teams or founders receive that kind of infusion of cash, is there a sweet spot for them, either number or kinds of talent that those teams should bring on?
It just, what is your map? Like, what is your path ahead? What are you trying to accomplish, and who do you need to hire in order to accomplish that? And for me, my biggest secret to knowing, help me figure out what to do is just talking to people like Joanna or somebody that's done it before a ton. Like, hey, here's my plan. What do you think? What did you do when you received this capital? I just try and get, for me, as many experiences as possible. What do you wish that you did? This group is probably awesome for that. What mistakes should I think about? How much cash should I have? All these fun questions that keep you up at night. So I don't have
Awesome.
a magic number. I just try and figure out what other people have done and what you need to do, and what roles, again, you can hire offshore in a cheaper area on contract, part-time. Yeah, leave room for the
Cool.
unknown, legal extra months of runway with money
Thanks,
left.
James.
Yeah, I mean, you're always optimistic as a founder. You always think you're going to get that raise. You always think this good thing is going to happen, but yeah, plan for it to not.
Awesome. Cool. I appreciate that answer. Thanks.
Pages, I have a little talk about that in the presentation. Lizzie, tell me if you agree with this, but like essentially you should feel so overwhelmed before you start hiring, as opposed to hiring first and then like you need to let the business get out ahead of the team and then catch up, as opposed to hiring before you have demand and product market fit and all of those things. Cause that's, I think, how you overhire and do it incorrectly.
Yeah, and I mean, Mountaintop, other Nate's company, all their comps are public. I mean, comp is out there, but if you look at their comps, they're not paying high. Like, and the amazing thing is that you can find good people that are willing to work for you for less. It's just about taking the time to find those people and selling them on the opportunity. But I think it's easy to be like, oh, this person asked for $200,000, so I need to do that. Like, you don't need to do that. You need to think, what are my comp priorities? What makes sense? Really budget. And I mean, sometimes you have to hire that person for a little bit more because that's the person and you need them right now, and they're gonna make you all this money later, but probably not.
Do you have one more for your buddy Patrick before you hop off here?
Yes, for Patrick, yes.
Oh, I was gonna respond to Teja's thing as well. Just I've been in big companies and I've been in lots of startups, and I think it's our job to figure out how to hire the right number of people it's super common, no matter how big or small the company is, to overhire without proper planning. And it happens at companies that are worth billions, and it happens at startups that get 100 grand, 50 grand, 5 million. So I don't think there's like a proper answer. It's about doing it's up to you. I don't think anybody else can look in, is what I'm trying to say, and say, what's the right number of people for you? And when you have to be the one who kind of figures that out, and then make sure that you are budgeting and scheduling your hiring correctly. And I do think doing more with less is a really good way to think when you're small. It's also good when you're big, but you have more buffer, so it's easier to like forget what that means, I think. But for us, it's like, can you get the person for cheaper? Do you really need two people? Sometimes hiring two people is more expensive than one, depending on like the levels you get them at. It doesn't seem like it, so it can be easy to like go get a bunch of people for less, but you haven't done the diligence and end up spending more money than you would have with fewer people, right? So I don't know, I'm just kind of blathering about it.
On the flip side, though, there are roles that are going to be really hard to find. A leadership role is going to be hard to find.
100%.
A really niche role is going to be hard to find. If you want to really hire a woman or person of color for X role, it is going to be harder to find. So in that case, I think you might want to start the process a little bit before your hair is on fire. Otherwise, you can be in a bad business position where you can't fill your role and it's really hurting you. But you have to know what that role is yourself.
Awesome.
Thank
All right,
you.
Lizzie, thank you. Can we have everyone unmute themselves? Give her a round of applause, please. Thank you, Lizzie, for coming.
Thanks, Lizzie.
Lizzie, do you want to just leave your email in the chat so people can, I know you gave it earlier, just type it in there just so everyone can reach out if they need some help with hiring and things of the sort.
Thank you so much. Yeah, if you have any questions, reach out. Let me put my LinkedIn too, and then I will get out of your hair and eat some lunch.
You're only missing 3 horrible war stories that I've messed up in my hiring process, so don't worry.
Sure, I've experienced them in the recruiting I've so enjoy. Thank you,
The
Al.
most painful lessons. Thank you, Lizzie, for coming.
Thanks.
Bye-bye. Awesome. Thank you, Patrick. Patrick, what was the role that she wanted to hire you for, by the way?
Man, I've had so many jobs and been turned down for so many jobs that it was probably game or graphics or platform programmer somewhere. But what ended up happening every time was for a while, I got so good at networking that for a while I thought I would start a recruiting company. So I would end up getting a job like while we were talking, right? We'd start talking and she'd say, here's this job. And I'd be in, you can't really overlap them. It's really hard to like, overlap a job that you've already applied to with a recruiter and for them to go to that job as well. So I was just very broad net myself and tapping into my network and talking to Lizzie and potentially other recruiters at the same time. And that probably happened, I'm going to guess at least 3 times over the course of like 5 or 6 years. And then because she's here in Seattle and because it's gaming, right, we ended up overlapping a lot and the founder thing. Yeah. I can't say exactly what job, Don. There's been so many.
Problem to have.
Yeah, I was really good at getting interviews. That wasn't the hard part.
It's a step.
And the thing that's was really tough for me, this is a personal war story. I don't want to take too many people's time, so this is your show. But like I have done a ton of interviewing. Like I worked at Microsoft, we had tons of interview training and all that. Like really good at interviewing people. And even with all that, I would have a lot of challenges with the like standard programmer interview, even though I've been doing it for years and years and years. So like, I don't know why, but it led to lots of interviews and lots of recruiter talks.
I know why, because you're an entrepreneur and every one of us that are entrepreneurs are horrible at getting real jobs.
End up doing all the jobs around the other people. Job, but convincing somebody that you're the right person is the hard part, right? Like you end up being the lead, whatever it is, in the whatever skill set you have. If you're an entrepreneurial type, programming, design, whatever it is, and then you're running circles around everybody else when you're in someone else's company. But to prove that you're that person up front can be a bitch. That's been my experience.
Yeah. Proudly unemployable, James, as well. I see you put in the comments. Yeah. It's I always have said that. I feel like the greatest founders just they can't get put into one role and do the same thing over and over. I think it's just too hard for their brains to handle that.
I will say, can I say one last thing on Lizzie's talk? I mean, she talked a lot about those big salaries from places like Amazon, Google. That is definitely true, and it's definitely a challenge when bringing people in. But there is sort of a less common but excellent archetype, I think, of people to hire. If you can find somebody that has done really well, who's like, I'm just done with corporate, like I'm done with, and I have a couple years in me, and I'm willing to like come in for cheap, but hopefully on the upside, and I just want to like have a good time and do something cool. Those are really hard to find, but they're often some of the best hires you can get in a small company or a startup because they've got experience, right? Not everybody who came from Amazon is looking for a giant salary next just because they work there. A lot of those people are because they've set a lifestyle expectation and they probably live somewhere like Seattle or LA or New York that's really expensive. But if you can get somebody who's like, I've done fine, I just want to do something cool for a couple of years and has like a really strong work ethic and really good experience, they've in my startup experience been really good. But they're harder to, there's less of them.
That's a great point. And I think VCs look for the same thing because if you're willing to go from a big salary to now chugging along on a small one with ramen noodles, it's something they want to invest in if you come from one of those big brand companies. But you're right, it's very hard to find, and most people that have that level of salary don't want to give it up ever. All right, thank you, Joanna, as well for introducing us to Lizzie. I appreciate that very much. That was very much appreciated. I'm going to do a quick presentation. These are like my 4 lessons around hiring. My 4 lessons around, I guess, team and hiring. And then also just real quick. So we have 5 upcoming conversations. Next week should be very interesting. If you know the All Things XR podcast, it's a great podcast. It's specifically, obviously, for AR, VR. And their host has agreed to come broadcast our speed pitching session. So it'll go up on his Spotify, Apple, all of the pages, YouTube, his website, all of that. So that'll be really, really cool to do. And I have a slide of kind of the way that format's going to work. But then we have a week off for Oculus Connect. Frankly, I need a break. I'm like quite exhausted. I'm kind of hitting my limit. So very important, I think, to just recharge. And then for anyone that's in Oculus Connect, that'll be amazing. I'm gonna get a text group going like we had for AWE. We probably had like 10, 15 people in the text group. So that was cool because people were meeting up in person. So if you're going to Oculus Connect, I'll send that survey tomorrow. Then we have next week, which is October 2nd, Sam from FitXR, legend, raised 11 million. He's in our group. We've talked about him before, but it'll just be a really cool experience. Similar to Inga, he'll be able to talk through like, this is the front lines of being a founder. Joanna, correct me if I'm saying Nanea's name incorrect, but Nanea.
You said it right. You said it right.
I've been practicing. All right, nice. Nanea from Trip, she corrected me. She's raised 29 million, not the number I said earlier, which was 11. So total boss, one of the best apps out there, and is doing real traction. So she's going to come, and similar to Sam and Inga, will give us like a very clear motivational speech as well as founder perspective on what are the right things to be doing to grow your business. So she's the week right after Sam, I believe. And then we have 2 VCs coming as well after the 2 founders we have coming. One is Ben Yu, who I've known for a while from Sierra Ventures. He's the managing partner of Sierra, which is a $264 million fund. They'll do anything from 500K first checks to $10 million Series A's. So they are earlier stage than the Nikos and some of these larger funds I've been bringing. That was one of the things I wanted to do on purpose here, was start to go a little earlier. And then we have someone from Hartman Capital coming as well. 2 of their 3 analysts are like specifically metaverse investors on their website. It's a $55 million frontier tech fund. I keep hearing about them over and over and over. And so I reached out and asked them if they would come talk with us. I think that's going to be really beneficial because Sierra's they'll put in the 10 million, but like Hartman's specifically looking to put in the 200 to $1 million checks. So that'll be a really cool experience to have them come talk with us as well. So those are 5 great, amazing people we have. And for next week specifically, this is how I'm going to run this experiment. So I'm going to have to collect slides from everybody that wants to participate in this speed pitch next week. But basically, I bought a little hourglass. It's a 1-minute hourglass. And so for each person, I'm going to start it up. And you'll have the minute to go through your funding raise, why you started the business, and then give a call to action to his audience of listeners, as well as people that are from our group that are listening. So download the app, sign up for XYZ on xyz.com. I'm hiring a developer, just kind of what is something that can benefit you. So this will be very cool because it's going to be kind of like a speed networking session in the sense that we're all going to be able to basically hear what everyone else is doing, what they're building, and then you can reach out afterwards within school. And then hopefully also this will be a good way to kind of market what you're doing. He's never done anything like this, so I hope that it works well. But he has, he's done great blogs with all of his podcasts, and he really does a good job of creating content. So it should be very cool to have him come and do that with us next week. So I'll send out the template and start to collect slides soon. All right, so we have 18 minutes. I've made every mistake that you can imagine on the hiring front and building this team. And so I wanted to go through some of the stories, and you can kind of draw lessons from these stories. This is like everything from me as a 1-person founder in a cafe in San Francisco, no funding, to firing all 25 people. And that whole journey is kind of this story here. So my first one, key lesson that I had was optimize for chemistry, not credentials. There's nothing more important than having chemistry, and what's on paper, to Lizzie's point, to Patrick's point, it doesn't really matter all that much. So the way that I made that mistake was during my initial search for a co-founder. I hired a recruiter. It was for free. So I said, okay, I'll give you a percentage of the first year salary of the co-founder that you can find for me. And in my head, it was not about who is the person I have the best chemistry with. It was about who is the person that looks the best on a pitch deck so that I can raise VC funding. That was like the mindset I was in at the time. And so I was searching heavily for a credible team. I found a great guy. I love the guy and I loved his team. And they had been building VR for 5-6 years. So basically, I told him, hey, if I were to raise $1 million around the idea that you all will quit what you're doing and come work with me and we start this new company, is that something you're interested in? So essentially, I was able to like acquire a credible team from a VR company and have them come work with me. And so that's what I did. And this was a huge mistake. Our starting team from day one was me, CEO, CTO, senior dev for Unity, a junior dev for audio, a 3D designer / concept artist, and a technical PM. 6 people, all with nice computers. We like basically from day one, we're burning 60 grand a month, something insane like that. Really, really poor way to start a business. And you see a lot of these companies that raise 20-30 million bucks before they have product market fit, and then they go out of business. Like, this is how that happens. And so to me, this is the number one thing that I would take away, is that, and this I think you probably have kind of understood just in my mindset about everything, like you need to underspend and underhire and under everything until you have really clear product market fit, and that the pain should not be coming from you. The pain should be coming from only one thing that makes you want to go higher, and that is that you have way too much demand that you cannot keep up with. Other than that, in my opinion, stay away from any sort of spending or firing. This is what ended up happening with that team. This was, maybe 3-4 years later. I was in my parents' house in Florida. I booked a meeting with the first person I was going to let go at 4 a.m. Eastern time, which was 9 a.m. London time. And so literally at 4 a.m. in the morning, I am sitting in Florida through Zoom, firing people at 9 a.m. in London. 4 a.m. I fired somebody, 4:15 I fired somebody, 4:30, 4:45, 5, 5:15, 5:30. I let go of, this was like our entire marketing team, our first 7 people. So it was just like brutal. I was crying in between calls. I felt like such a failure, obviously, and I was just so disappointed in myself, and I felt like I let everybody down. So to avoid that pain, just do not hire people until you have to. Like, it is so important that you just figure this stuff out by yourself, and it should feel like you're spending more time by yourself than not, until it's extremely painful. This was the third lesson, and this is what Lizzie talked about when she shares her P&L with her team. I think that's amazing. I would do the exact same thing if I was in this scenario where I was building out a startup again. Like, I would have full transparency for all 30 people. I read this, so I won't read it again, but this email was something that I just remember thinking, like, how do I respond to this? What should I do? I was 26 at the time. And so, 26. And so, like, he was 35. Everyone working for me was much older. And so I didn't know what to do. And what I wish that I had done is that we never even got to the point where one of our employees felt the need to like send an email asking if he's safe or not. I wish that I was just from day one transparent and said, this is the exact numbers and the amount of cash we have. And then this is kind of like how all of this ended. And it was a really sad ending for a number of reasons. But this was the email I sent to my investor base. And I said, hi, everyone. My plan is to give the remaining team their notices on Monday. I'll ask them to discontinue work on Tio and instead I'll introduce them to potential employers. I spoke with the corp dev team from many companies, Facebook, Twitter, Amazon, Google, Slack, Zoom, Discord, Snapchat, Eventbrite, and VR companies. So I'm confident I can help our team get the right interviews for open job positions they find online. I strongly believe that it would have been better to be acqui-hired because this team has worked together for 5 years and it would be sad to see them all dispersed to different tech companies. I have an opportunity to join a VR company on the West Coast, but it would require our team moving their families, so I don't think this is an option. I'm still in conversation with 3 different acquirers, and I'm talking with 3 of the 4 tonight, but I'm not expecting much other than rejection. Too niche has been the common reason thus far. If we don't hear positive news from one of those 4 today, then I'll go forward with this plan on Monday. This means the team will be let go and I will begin to shut down our entities and I'll wire back capital to investors on a prorated basis, roughly 10 cents on the dollar. My personal plan is to move out of London in the next 2 weeks and move in with my parents in the USA while I figure out what's next for me. I feel that we've left it all out there on the field. I'm proud of our efforts despite coming up short. Even on the very last day of operations, I am planning to work until late at night in case there's a small chance something might happen over the weekend. The team is the same. I'm extremely sorry and sad to report that we will not be making money this opportunity. I really, really wish this would have worked out. I'll send confirmation on Monday, yada, yada, yada. I get teared up reading this even 4 years later because it has so many feelings. And this was, so I had a call with the acquirer that I felt was like probably our best shot at buying our business. We had been talking for 3 months. I was, 50-50 on it being possible. But they had taken all of our team's visa information, all of our team's, IDs. They did background checks. Like they were at the point where they were going to decide if they were going to buy us or not. And so I get a call that night from the acquiring company, and the guy who was the acquirer said that my co-founder had been going behind my back, interviewing with this company about 6 months prior to that phone call. And so they have a policy internally at that company that they're not allowed to hire, they're not allowed to acquire teams that have already been rejected for being hired within the last 12 months. Anyways, internal policies. But it like killed me because it basically found out that this, the team already kind of knew that this was falling apart 6 months before. And I had sat with my co-founder multiple times talking about this acquisition, and I never heard anything about this. And like, it was just the worst feeling for a million reasons. And so the next morning, this is the 5 last people that were in our company. We sat around this product that we built, and I gave the news that this is the final time we'll use this product and the final time we'll be together. And I let everybody go at that meeting. So again, that goes back to founder transparency. Like I wish that my co-founder, like I loved the guy, and had he said, hey, I'm worried that this business is going out of business and I need to fight for my family and make sure we have income, like I would have helped him get a job, or I wish that I told our one employee sent me that email prior that, yeah, we are really low on cash and like, you probably shouldn't consider doing these things and basing your life around this business at this stage. So anyways, all that is very humanizing, but it's to say that like this stuff is really, as the CEO, as the leader, as the founder, you have a massive responsibility. And some of you will go on to build really big companies. And like this stuff is something that you need to be thinking of. Some of you will maybe not make it past this stage that I was at. Like, it all can happen. But yeah, I just think this stuff is so personable because it is personable. And like you're hiring people that you love and that you want to work with for important reasons. And I assume every one of you that have co-founders love your co-founder, up and down. So anyways, that's my story from start to finish. I hope it was entertaining. Any thoughts or questions? Oh, I actually have, oh, sorry. Go.
Transparency and your honesty. That's really, and your vulnerability. It's really appreciated.
I think obviously like reading that email, I read it earlier and I started like actually crying. Like I was able to hold myself back. But I mean, you all know how much you're putting into this. Like your whole existence is kind of wrapped up in these businesses. And if it's not, then that's its own problem, I think. But like, yeah, reliving that was really, really tough because I just remember all the nights that I gave up stuff, all the sacrifices I made, like, and it just was for, essentially nothing, at least at the time. So one more thing that I do want to say, I think I made a lot of mistakes. One thing I did not ever make a mistake about was like we always had fun. Like it was the number one thing that I tried to ensure at the business. Even during COVID, I would force everybody to like come dressed up with masks on, like not those masks, but like, costumes. Like we were trying to just do anything that like made things more bearable. And so like we would go do, VR gamer tag, stuff like that. We would get in our platform in the bottom left corner. This was Team Panda. Like we had these different teams that we would do trivia nights together. We were constantly like going out for a beer or breakfast. Like, and even if you don't have the, whatever, just I think fun is so important. And the reason why I wanted to do that fun stuff was because I read an article around how soldiers bond in the army. And that is one of their key things is they have fun together. And so I think that's really important for company culture is to just like make sure that you're making it an experience that people are proud to be a part of and have good memories with, no matter the result of how it ends up.
Oh, also I want to add, also like to one of Lizzie's points, like also be careful about hiring someone from corporate, like their entire career in corporate, because they're not going to make a really good fit culturally or work style in a startup. And we worked with someone who had like a whole corporate career and was just not used to like rolling up the sleeves and doing what's needed in a startup. So I would like advise against someone's background, even though they think it sounds cool, they really don't have what it takes to be in a startup.
It's so hard to understand that without experiencing it, I think. But you're very right. Yeah. Nico actually told me that when I was going through this hiring process. He's like, go find, like, I was 25 at the time. He's like, go find another 25-year-old who has no idea what they're doing and doesn't know that they have no idea what they're doing. That was Nico's advice to me, was like, go find someone that's unprofessional, has no idea what they're doing. Like, you don't need, just figure out someone you enjoy being around. And instead, I went and found like the most credible people on paper I could. And nothing against them, they're amazing, but it just wasn't the right fit for a startup because it is so kind of, broad, like you're fighting hand to fist combat all the time.
And it's unstructured. I mean, they have no idea how to deal with unstructured work environments. And they can't go with the flow or figure out like what's next. You have to really hire for resourcefulness because if X doesn't work out, they have to be able to pivot and understand like, okay, what's the workaround? What can we do next to still achieve this goal?
Yep. And most of the best startups don't have their first idea work out, and that's how they end up being successful is because they're nimble enough to keep moving. I talked about it before, but like I don't know if everyone knows the story of Twitter, but Biz Stone, who was their it was Evan, sorry, it was who was the co-founder of Twitter? Biz Stone, Ev, and then whatever the last guy's name is. Anyways, someone was put in the chat. But point being is they started off
Jack Dorsey.
Yeah, duh. Okay, good call. Yeah, Jack Dorsey. He's the most famous of them all. Anyway, so they started off being a streaming platform, kind of like Twitch, and they raised all this money. They spent all the money. They were at the point where it was like, okay, we have 10 cents in the dollar. Should we give it back or should we keep it? And Biz said what they did was they came together with like the last, I think they fired everyone in the company except maybe 3 or 4 people, the co-founders and then 3 or 4 people. And they said, okay, like we have basically like 2 months left. Should we just give this money back or should we keep trying? And they said, let's spend 48 hours over the weekend coming up with ideas building it. You have to be able to build it in 48 hours. And then we'll know on Monday or Tuesday if we should keep doing this or not. And so Biz said they literally like sat in this room for 48 hours straight. They all just like hacked away little stupid ideas, and they ended up coming up with this concept of this 140 characters, which obviously grew into Twitter. And like you see that with so many businesses, that actually the most important thing to optimize for when hiring and when finding talent is just nimbleness, and like who is able to adjust on the last second fly. And there's a plethora of great startup stories that have done that, where they kind of just like throw out their whole first idea and then figure out what to do and go that direction. It ends up being big. So I do think, Christine, you're right. Like, go for people that are nimble, flexible, resourceful, and that is really, and you love. Like, those are the 4 things that you should care about. Any
Hey, Tom,
other?
oh,
Yep.
sorry, I have a question. So at my last startup, we had like a 4-day work week, and we were trying to ensure work-life balance for everyone. But I'm like, wait, is there ever a work-life balance for the founding members of a startup? Let's say the first 5 or first 10 members. Is that even possible?
Are you asking, or are you sarcastically?
Well, no, sorry. Like, this is a genuine question. Like, for anyone who's gone through that journey, is that possible?
I'd love to hear. Anyone have an opinion on that?
Sorry,
I kind of do. My opinion is, at least for me, no. Not even just if I really wish that I could do the whole work-life balance thing, because I know it'd be healthier. But I tried to encourage my contractors not to crunch, because obviously I don't want to burn them out. So I make sure they take their weekends, but I'm not working Saturday and Sunday and posting on the Discord the whole time. And if anyone sees me working and is thinking like, oh, I could put some work into this today, I'm not doing anything, I would never ask that of them. But I want to show as an example that I'm going to be doing it. So, that's just me. It's my thing. I don't expect anyone else to sacrifice any extra time, but I don't feel like I can justify for myself not doing everything I can, especially when it comes down to the wire. And I'm just going to know that I'm going to be laying in bed, staying up all night anyways, wondering like, am I going to get this done? Like, should I have done more work today? So for me, it's not an option.
Gotcha. Okay. Thanks for sharing.
But I'm also like insane, so don't follow that.
I had my dad growing up would always say to my sister, if I can't do what I need to do in 40 hours a week, then I'm doing something horribly wrong. And he was always home at 6 p.m. And it's like the number one thing that I, think about as a kid growing up was like the fact that he was always home at that time. And like we would, like, to the point where we were like dogs, like my sister and I would wait at the back door and wait for him because he was always there at that time. So I think it probably depends the type of business you're doing. His was running a tire store, which is very different than running a tech company. And I think, when you're thinking about what's the business you want to start, whether it's this one or the next one or whatever, I do think considering the amount of hours and the type of business is really important to consider. Like, after reading that email and sending that email, I could not go through that again. And when I was starting Spatial Collective, I was like, I cannot go through the startup fundraise, grind again, at least not right now. And so the Spatial Collective is very different. It's just me. It's kind of like us as a group. It's not building hard technical products. And so it was very much designed around, can I do this 40 hours a week, be happy, and like spend time with my family? But I do absolutely, want to get back to the startup grind. And I do think if you're doing a venture-backed business, yeah, you got to really be putting in some pretty crazy hours to make that work.
And to clarify, I don't think we should glamorize like that at all, that lifestyle. If I had like kids, if I had a family, if I had anything else, I would definitely not be doing what I'm doing now. So everybody's different. Your situation's different. So yeah, I don't think that it's glamorous. I don't think anyone should strive to sacrifice like this. It's some kind of masochism, maybe, but yeah, that's my opinion.
Yeah,
Does
but
anyone with kids want to give advice? Oh, hey, sorry.
I do, like, to keep my sanity, I do a ride outside, weather permitting, every morning. Like first thing, I mean, I need coffee to get going, but then I like ride because I get nature, sunshine, movement, and I can listen to great music. And it even puts me in a flow state. So, like, problems I'm thinking about, like, the answers come to me. And so, and then also it's like my neurons are just like, I'm so focused though and calm. It gives me a certain calmness then where things like that, if I don't do my ride, it's like, oh my God, like I feel like it's the end of the world. But like just getting a ride in like helps tremendously. I have to do it first thing because otherwise the day gets away and then you can never
Right? Yeah. I
get,
totally get that.
get to it. So
Does
Cool.
it, do you feel like that you work more efficiently after you ride? Like you work less hours, even though, yeah.
well, I still work a lot of hours, but I think I just feel I can just focus myself more from that ride, the endorphins and everything else. Like I
Mhm.
have to do cardio for that. I also like if I have a half hour, my gym is close. I still lift weights. I love that. Because I used to compete in bodybuilding, but it just gives me like
Nice.
a source of strength and like feeling confident. So, and that's why I'm doing sports games. Because I hope the next generation gets into it.
It's a good why.
Mhm.
That
Right
needs
I
there
to
do
with you,
agree.
Christine. I'm doing the VR martial arts samurai dojo, so it's kind of a very similar thing with me as well, where it's like using it kind of as a meditative and getting into that flow state, and also like educational. But have you guys heard of Healthy Gamer GG? He's like
No.
a
No.
popular YouTuber. Yeah, he's doing really well right now, and he also like was like uh doing like Indian yoga spirituality for like 8 years, like living in a temple. And he also like he's got some good videos on flow state, so I can find that and share that in the group.
that'd be awesome.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think that's super crucial actually, like the getting outside, the fresh air, the sunshine, the biking, for example. Like for me, it's I take my dog out. I have a Siberian Husky, so she's on a schedule. She'll tell me when it's time, and that keeps me like, from going crazy. So I think that's super important. Even though I don't take weekends, if you can work your lifestyle around doing the work where it doesn't feel like you need a weekend from it, I think that's worked for me in my personal experience. But I also think it's, when you have other people in your life, when you have other responsibilities, it would be irresponsible not to take the weekend. So I totally understand that as well.
Yeah, James, I think that's where it got hard for me in the last business was I felt the responsibility of everyone else. Like when I think that's probably the wrong mindset because they signed up for it as much as you asked them to participate, as far as employees, I mean. Any other tips or advice for when you're feeling overwhelmed, what to do? I know in school, I was talking about, I take naps all the time. To me, that's really a great thing to do. Like even just a quick nap. Any thoughts or advice you have for when you're feeling overwhelmed, what to do besides the working out and napping?
I take a walk, like just to move your body, like releases anxiety in general. So any movement you can do, even if it's like doing laps in your or changing the environment, go work in a different place. Like go to a coffee shop, change your environment around.
That's
When
that's
I
the trick. Yep.
At the last startup I worked for before I was a founder, the office is right outside Quarry Lake in Austin. So we would every day in the afternoon, everyone as a team would walk around the lake and then we would come back to work. And I think it actually is so important to get like in that flow state, like you're saying, and also just like to separate, like, because if you're grinding at a desk for too long, your efficiency starts to be reduced. So just that shift can increase efficiency for sure. It's worth the extra hour that you spend.
David, Francisco, you two have been on mute. You want to give us some tips here? I'd love to hear some thoughts from you too. Francisco, appreciate you writing in the group as well.
I can give some tips. I mean, I don't know if my tips are particularly good ones because I just work. So, yeah, I mean, I'm in the UK. It's what, 9 o'clock at night, and still in front of my desk. And I was here at 6 a.m. this morning. I think space to think. It doesn't, you know, for me, like I was talking to another VR developer today, and we were talking about the, you know, authors. They say they give themselves a target each day of like words to write, and it doesn't really matter whether your target's this or someone else's target is something else, but you kind of like you set yourself your target. And I always find that I'm creative first thing, so I always try and get up early to do those creative roles, and then I know that I slow down and I can listen to webinars at 9 o'clock at night and it's okay. But like, don't get me designing a game at 9 o'clock at night because it'd be rubbish. So it's also about like targeting the best time and giving yourself that space to do the thing that you know you can do at that point. Like if you get up early at 6 a.m. and do your emails, for me, that's a waste of that 6 a.m. energy bar. But for other people, it might be perfect. It might be perfect for them. But it's like thinking about when to do things as well. Like they're giving yourself the space, that blocking it out and saying, that's when I'm going to be best at doing this. And then fitting your day around that. And I highly recommend not sitting at your desk for 12 hours like I do as well.
I agree with that, but I'm the complete opposite. See, I'm so productive at night. I use my mornings to send all my emails because I know before 10 a.m. I'm gonna be brain dead, so I might as well just write emails. So yeah.
I
feel
sometimes
that.
write my emails and then delay send them, so it looks like I'm sending emails in the morning when I'm doing my creative stuff. Although that can catch you out if something's changed overnight, but yeah.
That's funny. That's great advice.
Love that.
I'll actually do like I do most of my Zooms on Wednesday, and that way I can get dressed up for it. This is different because of America, but you know, I'll get dressed up on Wednesdays. Like I'll wear sweatpants on Mondays. I kind of know, you know, based on what I need to do, how I need to get psyched up for the day. So that's awesome advice, David. Francisco, you want to give us a ending note here of some advice? Oh, my dog's choking. 1 second. Okay. All right. He's okay. All right. Good boy. Oh, he threw up.
Aw,
Hey.
You're
Poor buddy.
muted. You're still muted, Francisco. I saw your lips moving, but there's no voice coming out.
He's throwing up. You okay, boy?
Sorry guys, I had too many inputs, you know, from the headsets, from the camera, from the
We've been there.
So I was saying, you know, personally, I started creating my own app on 2020, and you know, when the pandemic came out, everybody was doing remote work, and suddenly everybody was having a ton of work in there, and I was rejecting all the offerings I was having for working as a VR developer because I wanted to create my own app. And it was quite difficult, you know, because there was a lot of offerings out there. And, you know, I personally was spending my savings. I was lucky enough, I got a grant from Epic at that time that helped me to build my app. But, you know, it can be quite difficult, you know, going to bed, and some of you guys said, you know, you go to bed and you're still thinking on, dude, I need to resolve this, I need to finish this task, I'm pending, or I really need this feature, or you know, just a deck, or whatsoever it is. It's quite difficult being an indie. In my case, personally, the technical side or the artistic side wasn't the difficult part. it was, you know, the business side of it, which used to be the most difficult for me, because I'm not a sales guy, you know, I'm a creator in terms of design and in terms of code. So, and it's still a thing for me out there. That's why I always looking for a business developer. But you know, luckily for us, on the content side, I mean on the 3D side or audio side, nowadays it's much more easy to be a solo developer or an indie developer rather than 10 years ago. You know, technology is helping us a lot in that sense. And you know, also there's a huge community out there that helps a lot. I relied a lot on the Unreal Engine community, and they helped me a lot in the things I didn't know about. You know, I was doing my first multiplayer without having, you know, I had zero idea on networking. And it was like, why is this so laggy? And I started figuring out that I was messing with all the code and realized that I need to, you know, rethink what I was doing. It was, you know, it wasn't only just about building a project, it was also doing my own school, you know, on how to do what I wanted to do. And I finally did it. You know, I just got my first client, I got published on NapLab, my MVP converted into a product for a university in the US. I made my own company there in the US. Me being here in Latin America, in Argentina, is quite difficult, you know, trying to sell something to a person in the US. So I can say I'm, you know, I'm happy because finally I was able to do it. But